Across America, frightening beasts are growing more aggressive.
It was the most terrified I've ever been in my life.
The creatures seem to be stalking humans.
I've never seen anything that could chew a car up like this.
It was huge. It was on 2 feet, and it was huge.
So I just sat there for a second because I had no idea what it was.
We're getting more and more violent interactions and confrontations.
Interactions that may have left behind the strongest evidence yet of the legendary monster that is Sasquatch.
The creature was hit right over here, right on the edge of property land.
Whatever it was really, really, really vicious.
Witnesses around the world report seeing monsters. Are they real or imaginary? Science searches for answers on Monster Quest. In once rural America, the expansion of residential developments is pushing further and further into what has been wilderness. And people are reporting growing numbers of close encounters with creatures that could be unknown to science.
There's a print here and here, and it rolled across and made a dent here, and then left one here.
When it grabbed me, you know, this hand was huge. I mean, you can see my hand does not go around my arm.
Witnesses describe a variety of creatures, including a beast that walks on 2 legs and is said to be part man and part bear. It is thought to be up to 9 feet tall with frightening red eyes. Some say it is the legendary Sasquatch. The earliest known written documentation of the creature came in an 1883 article in the Newark Daily Advocate of Ohio. It reported an attack by a wild man, 8 feet high and covered in hair. The report tells of a beast lurking in the woods near Ontario, Canada. The creature emerged from a thicket on the warpath. In one hand, a tomahawk made of stone, and in the other a bludgeon. His appearance struck such terror into the hearts of the men that they made tracks for their boat, which was moored by the beach. The giant followed them, uttering demoniacal yells. Only the sound of the gunfire managed to ward off the menacing creature. This is not the only tale of apparently aggressive encounters with Sasquatch.
So there's a consistent telling of these tales of violent interactions.
Loren Coleman is a renowned cryptozoologist.
So those kinds of stories are very intriguing, as opposed to the general kind of rural myth that Sasquatch is out there kidnapping Indian maidens. What I found in my research in various stories down through the years, that it was males that were being kidnapped. And there's stories here and there of, one guy saying he was thrown over the shoulder of a Bigfoot.
In 1924, Albert Ostman had just such an encounter.
Albert Ostman was an individual who was a prospector in British Columbia in 1924. He was going up to the Tobit Inlet and looking for various minerals. And he was in his sleeping bag, and all of a sudden he was swooped up by a Bigfoot who threw him over his shoulder and ran back to his canyon home.
Today, these reports seem to be surfacing with greater frequency.
So we indeed have reports of Bigfoot getting in conflicts with humans, getting into fights with humans, punching human beings through their windows of their cars, throwing rocks at their cabins.
And all of a sudden a big black thing just rolled across my vehicle because I had no idea what it was.
Amanda Schlutner is a resident of Staples, Minnesota, a remote town 150 miles northwest of Minneapolis. She was driving home one night when she says she hit an enormous, hairy creature.
It was just getting dark, and I was driving down the road, and I was going about 35, and all of a sudden a big black thing just rolled across my vehicle.
Her car struck the animal head-on, and the impact threw the animal into a ditch. As the collision happened, Schlutner got a good look at it.
It was probably like 7 feet tall, like a lot of fur, dark, kind of looked like a bear on two legs, but bigger, and almost looked like a person at the same time.
You could see it was pretty big, and it was moving pretty quick on two legs.
The incident occurred just a few hundred feet from her boyfriend's home. Her boyfriend, Kirk Orr, and his brother Matt witnessed the collision from the front yard.
It was confusing. At first, it did kind of look like a bear, but the way it moved and the way it twisted, it looked kind of like a person, but it was too tall and too broad.
Like when you see a football player wearing his gear.
Yeah, it was like 8.5 feet tall, so
it was pretty big.
They grabbed a .410 shotgun and a .30-30 rifle before chasing it into the woods. They feared the animal was wounded and still very aggressive.
It kind of leaned its hand down on its leg and grabbed a branch and started pulling itself back up. And right after that's when I unjammed my gun and shot it. And that's when it stumbled back and started to come forward. I shot again.
Kirk believes he hit it in the chest, but the wounded beast disappeared into the woods.
We were both pretty accurate shots at what we could see of the figure, and they're pretty powerful rifles, so it should have took it down.
We know for a fact we hit what we shot.
The two men are hunters and say this was no bear. It was far too big and walked on two legs. Schlutner and the Orr brothers remain afraid of whatever is still out there.
I've never seen anything like this, so it really kind of scared me. I didn't know what to think or what it was. And it's one weird bear.
The only thing it could be then would be a bear.
David Garcelis is a bear research biologist with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. He has examined photos of the damage to the hood of the car and says that this was simply a bear sighting and nothing more.
The only thing that could explain a black creature in that area that could walk on 2 feet and that would be big enough to match approximately what they said, you know, maybe it's 7 feet tall or something like that at the biggest, a really big bear. Every year there's, I don't know, 50 to 100 bears that are hit by cars in Minnesota. And in fact, you know, the conservation officer did the proper thing where he comes out and investigates it. If he found a dead bear there, we would have gotten a report on it.
Now, Monster Quest travels to Minnesota to investigate the Schlutner sighting.
And the story has remained the same with no changes, so I have to believe that what they encountered is the real deal. Because if something is hoaxed or the people are lying, stories change, and the story has never changed.
Bob Olson has worked as an auto body specialist for 40 years and has seen damage caused by everything from wild animal collisions to vandalism. He's convinced that whatever Amanda Schlutner hit, it was walking on 2 feet.
As you can see down here, this is all broken up. So it hit something very heavy. In fact, and I believe when this thing came out, it was hit, the hand hit, the elbow hit here, swung around, the butt hit the fender, and off to the woods. And you can see literally where it rolled off. So what I've seen here is consistent with what they said happened.
The team searches for forensic trace evidence. Tiny pieces of hair, blood, or tissue could reveal the identity of the creature that Amanda hit.
Here's a whole section of the mount panel that fell right in after the impact. There might be some hair on that. Yeah, the whole thing shattered and fell right down, so there could be other evidence down in here. It almost looks like there could be another hair lying down on the bottom down here, if you can see that. Guess what I see? Right underneath this hornet. See it? Right here. If I could get this piece out, this might have something on it too. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Look at that. A double hair. There's two, right? That is a good hair.
The expedition team will send the strands of hair to the Monster Quest science team for testing. DNA testing could reveal exactly what hit the car. Olson and researcher Don Sherman will lead an expedition heading into the woods to try to find more evidence.
The creature, I believe, is dead or died back in the woods and is still back there.
The team is joined by Gene Hagen. a professional animal trapper with 30 years' experience.
Just about anything that's in the woods, we catch it. We're pretty consistent with knowing the different varieties of animals that are here.
Gene, Bob, and Don believe the creature could have been wounded or may be lying dead just a few yards or miles from the accident scene. So they begin their search at the edge of the property.
The creature was hit right over here, right on the edge of the property line.
Okay.
The creature went in about here, and it grabbed, sort of busted this branch as it went in or something here. So here's something.
And their search will yield a promising clue.
I can see the bullet hole over there in the tree where it entered. There still should be some evidence inside there, being that it's sealed up inside this wood.
Monster Quest has traveled across America to investigate close encounters with monsters. The amount of these type of run-ins are far too numerous to examine case by case. However, the most violent encounters provide the greatest insight into the growing conflict between man and these creatures whose habitats are being encroached on.
This was a creature. This was not a man.
Terry Reams was traveling along a busy interstate with his wife and parents near Yakima, Washington.
And we were headed east, back down I-84, and it was approximately 7 o'clock. It was raining.
Suddenly, the traffic slowed from 70 to about 35 miles per hour.
And we seen all these brake lights coming on and cars moving back and forth.
As Reams' car got closer to the cause of the traffic jam, they noticed an upright, shadowy figure in the road.
My first thought was somebody running down the road with a black jacket on, and it was fur. I mean, I looked up at it, trying to figure out what was this guy doing running down the middle of the highway, gonna get himself killed.
Reams says that the creature suddenly darted through traffic and ran to the passenger side of their car. It managed to keep pace, despite the fact that the car was moving at 35 miles per hour. Its face was just inches from the side window.
And then when I looked up at it and it looked down at me, it was an instant kind of a mellow shock that this was no guy. And I looked right into the face of this thing, and I could tell that it was definitely had fear in its eyes.
Apparently confused and agitated, the creature turned abruptly and ran directly into merging traffic.
It actually turned and ran right into the rear quarter panel of this truck camper. It kept on going, never even phased this thing, and went up approximately a 60-degree angle into the tree area and was gone. My mother just turns to us, and we all seen this, and she says, "Oh my goodness, we just seen a Bigfoot."
Reams reported the incident to the local sheriff and found that so had dozens of other people.
He says, "If it makes you feel any better, we've had over a dozen sightings of the same thing you just turned in. And if it makes you feel any better yet, 4 of them were police officers."
In Minnesota, the Monster Quest expedition team is attempting to pick up the trail of a mysterious creature that was hit by a car. The team is hoping the animal still lies dead nearby.
You know, this is all pretty nice, dark, black dirt. This should show tracks pretty good if we happen to find any. Even with the vegetation on the ground, it still might be feasible to see some prints. And when you're looking for tracks in vegetation, it's good to get down so you can see the path through the vegetation. If you look right down here, I can see a path where the trees have all been folded one direction, showing movement of travel. And it looks like it continues that way, so we must be on somewhat of a right path.
The team finds the location where the Orr brothers say they shot the beast.
Okay. I can see the bullet hole over there in the tree where it entered. Now that was the 30-30 shell, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a 30-30 or the slug, but there's also, you can see a bullet hole where it hit the branch right up there.
From where this bullet hole here landed to where that branch was snapped is probably about 9 feet.
Gene Hagen believes that one of the bullets could have passed through the creature before becoming wedged in a tree trunk.
The bullet's probably still lodged right in this piece. So I suppose we should, I'll take that.
Chop it down and cut that section off.
Yeah, we'll just chop it off like here and up here. There still should be some evidence inside there, being that it's sealed up inside this wood.
The expedition team takes a piece of the tree, just in case the bullet did pass through the animal and blood or tissue is preserved inside. The limb will be sent out for a preliminary X-ray to determine if the bullet is lodged within. Meanwhile, the researchers move deeper into the forest. They are now searching for the victim.
If it's out here and it's dead, chances are we're going to have to look in the deepest, thickest stuff for where he's going to hide, because even a bear will run to the thickest cover and try to hide why he's mortally wounded. Let's be careful where we walk. Even though the sign is old, we still may miss something.
Hagen brought along his dog, Trapper, a Labrador retriever that is known to have exceptional scent tracking abilities. Dogs are often used in police searches.
A dog can sense a lot more than a human nose can, and especially under these wet conditions.
Now, this is a well-used game trail here.
You may have used it as an escape route to get out of here. How fast do you think you can run down this trail?
This one here?
Yeah.
Oh,
pretty fast. How much sign do you think you're going to leave running that fast?
Oh, I don't know.
Not much.
After 4 hours searching, the trail grows cold.
We probably walked for 2 miles back in there. We saw a lot of sign of heavy creatures moving through the woods.
If there would have been any kind of a cadaver back there, any kind of a dead body, chances are you would have picked up that scent. I'm hoping we'll find some hair in that bullet. You know, at least we found that kind of evidence.
The science team is starting its tests with the tree limb containing the bullet which passed through the beast.
So here are 2 tree limbs. We've got the bark side, and we've got the mossy side. So that tells me that these should line up in this fashion.
Jay Epping, a veterinarian, X-rays the branch to determine if the bullet is still lodged in the wood.
We have an entry wound here and an exit wound, definitely from most likely a bullet. As you can see, the wood has actually come out. Then we have a second entry wound in this tree limb here, which would tell me that the bullet particle should be somewhere in this general vicinity. Wow, look at that. There's actually a bullet in here. You can see the entry point here. You can actually see a trail of bullet fragment all the way through that limb. The fragment trail continuing into the second limb, and right there is your actual bullet particle.
Epping will now send the entire log to a DNA lab. The lab will extract the bullet, and with it, any genetic material that may have adhered to the projectile.
And there were actually 2 tree limbs that had come in. One that the bullet had passed completely through, and the second in which the projectile was lodged.
Dr. Bruce McCord is a professor of forensic science at Florida International University. The department conducts evidence examinations for law enforcement agencies and provides expert testimony in state and federal courts. Finding DNA on a bullet after it has passed through a victim presents a unique challenge for McCord.
It's reasonable to expect that there would be very little DNA present on the bullet, particularly after it had lodged. It had passed through one tree and lodged in another.
The process begins by swabbing the entrance hole to collect any DNA that may have been scraped off the bullet as it entered the wood.
If you look at the X-ray, which is here, you can see that it never exited, but actually is lodged somewhere in the back of this log.
First, the log is sawn below the point of bullet entry.
You can see it's already starting to split.
and then split along the grain.
There's the bullet right there. You can see how the split was perfect, and we get it out quite easily.
The bullet is extracted. Next, the projectile is swabbed to remove any residual biological material. McCord's lab will use real-time PCR, a process that enables them to extract DNA from the smallest of samples.
If we have just a single cell left remaining, or the DNA equivalent of that left remaining on that bullet, we might be able to detect it and to determine if it's human or an upper primate.
Monster Quest is in America's heartland, where witnesses report violent encounters with strange beasts. Cryptozoologist Loren Coleman has studied these reports for years and believes that these encounters may be increasing.
Well, some of the more frequent interactions that turn very violent with humans and Bigfoot are these reports we get of individuals, their cars being attacked and them being scared in their cars, really sending a message to the humans that you're not welcome here. Could you move on?
One such account dates back to a dark night when a 17-year-old woman was the victim of a frightening and violent attack.
Christine Van Aker and her mother were in a car driving along in a rural area near Monroe, Michigan.
Von Acker claims a large, upright, hairy creature stepped out in front of their car, and the girl hit the brakes, causing the car to stall.
Her car was stopped, and the Bigfoot came up, stuck its arm through the window. So the next day, all over the media, there were these photographs of her with her black eye, and her mother, of course, being eyewitness too, confirmed that this actually had taken place.
There continues to be numerous reports of encounters, but while most lack physical evidence, others have clues.
That morning when we come out and saw the car, it was covered with blood.
Late one night, something menacing paid a visit to Dixie Rawson's home in Bishopville, South Carolina, a typical small town, 40 miles from Columbia. Something was able to move through the backyard undetected, making its way to the patio where Rawson had built cat shelters.
All the blankets were out of their boxes. They were all up and down the driveway, like somebody went in there and picked them out. There was nothing wrong with the patio. Nothing was moved. And the newspaper was in shreds.
Something had destroyed the cat shelters, and most of Dixie's cats were missing.
There were some that if I called them by name, they would come and they were gone. And haven't seen them since.
The monster had turned its focus to the van parked in the driveway. Claw marks and puncture holes were found all along the side and front of the vehicle, destroying the grille. The fender was pulled out of shape by the teeth of the attacker.
When we come out and saw the car, it was covered with blood.
These pictures were shot the morning after the attack.
Looks like whatever it was had been there a while, gnawing away at it.
Dixie called the police to report this wild attack, hoping to warn others. She was not prepared for what came next.
And all hell broke loose.
Couldn't believe it.
Bob Rawson looks down at the blood on his van, all the claw marks, and check out the hood.
He literally bit. And you can feel it underneath where he's bit right straight through here.
Who he is, a point of renewed debate in these parts. Some sure they know the only creature capable of this kind of damage.
They say it's the lizard man.
Rawson's incident was linked to an eerily similar attack that occurred just a few miles from their home 10 years earlier.
I went on the computer, and from then on in, it was Lizard Man. Lizard Man had come back.
The Lizard Man was blamed for another attack which damaged a vehicle in 1988.
We were investigating a car that had been mauled, and they told us at that time something had been lurking in this area, about 7 to 8 foot tall and big red eyes.
Liston Truesdale was sheriff at the time of the original Lizard Man sighting, over 20 years ago.
So we immediately started questioning people about what this was. And so we were trying to find out people that saw this thing.
Truesdale received a report by a 17-year-old boy claiming to have had an encounter with the creature while repairing a flat tire on the side of the road.
He had fixed his tire. He looked around and he saw this huge creature coming toward him with big red eyes and 3 fingers on each hand. So I couldn't believe what the kid was telling me. So I said, draw it. So he drew it.
Cryptozoologist Loren Coleman believes that Lizard Man and Sasquatch may be one and the same.
In South Carolina, there have been reports of what seem to be called locally lizard men, but sometimes if we get closer to the reports we find are more Bigfoot-like creatures. But, you know, we oftentimes hear from the South Bigfoot-type creatures that have algae on their skin and they can look green.
The fact remains, something destroyed the Rawsons' vehicle.
I've never seen anything that could chew a car up like this. You couldn't do it with a hammer and a pair of pliers. I know, the cops tried doing it.
Terrified, Dixie insisted that blood samples be taken from the car and tested.
Well, then, a month later, they come back and they said that it come back contaminated.
The Department of Natural Resources, which performed the first test, came back again.
I was actually called by the Lee County Sheriff's Department to try to get the test conducted on the blood sample.
Sam Stokes is a biologist with the Department of Natural Resources.
I finally located a lab. It was at the University of California at Davis, the veterinary genetics lab there. They conducted a DNA test, and it did come back as domestic dog.
Dixie disagrees with the DNR's analysis.
And I looked right at them, right on television, and I went, I don't believe it. I don't believe a dog can do this.
And then here's the worst damage, I believe.
Tony Carpenter is an auto body specialist, and John Van Root is a biologist trained in wildlife tracking and identification. They'll test the car again.
Looks like as the teeth were dragging down, he was getting his bottom teeth in on this lip and finally managed to straighten it all the way out. You see most of the damage is right here where he got a hold of it.
Yep. And it looks like from the marks of it, his upper teeth were here, bottom teeth there. Let's go look at the front. In the front, they have punctures through here.
And you say this is urethane here?
This is metal, but it was really rusty. We have seen a lot of animal damage of like wiring eaten and different items like that, but we've never seen a van where an animal's actually bit through steel, ripped it off, that kind of stuff. Then there's some bite marks over from this side where it looks like possibly it was clamping around this area.
Yeah, and the teeth are sliding off after they penetrate.
Yep.
They will gather evidence so they can use it to build a scaled model of the beast's jaw and test it on an identical car to the Rawson vehicle.
So it looks like this is probably the bite mark area, right here, right here.
It will be used to compare to local wildlife.
The spread of the canine teeth gives an indication of the skull size and therefore the size of the animal, the height at which it attacked this vehicle. The idea of this being the result of a black bear is very unlikely. The teeth are too close together. The skull would have been much bigger. A bear would have had the strength to rip the hood right off this van to get to whatever it was going after.
Well, we'll perform some tests and see what we can determine what kind of force it took to straighten out that wheel well the way it did, and see what we can come up with there, you know.
Whatever it was angry.
Yep, no doubt.
The reconstruction of the creature's jaw is underway. Monster Quest is investigating eyewitness reports of close encounters with monsters throughout America's heartland.
It was running straight towards me.
David Griffin had an encounter just 40 miles outside of Indianapolis, Indiana. He was deer hunting with his brother, peering through the sights of his scope, locked in on something large, moving in the brush.
I had the gun up to my cheek, the safety pulled off, ready to fire, and what came out of the brush wasn't a deer. It was some kind of a creature that looked between half man and half monkey or ape or whatever you want to call it. And it was gray in color, showing its teeth. I never heard a sound, but it was running straight towards me. It had this massive chest, and the hair was very thin on its front side next to the chest. And very well built, strong built creature. And it seen me, and like I said, it showed its teeth. Its eyes were bugged out from fright. It made a U-turn and headed back towards my brother. When it went through that brush, I was going to get it. I was going to shoot it. I started to go up the hill in the woods to go after it, and I felt very uneasy by myself. So something I never do, I sat down to wait on him. I never do that, and it was cold. It was probably 20 degrees. Damn near froze to death.
David never told anyone about what happened that day.
Something that wasn't supposed to be there, and I probably just wanted to forget it, you know, because I loved hunting and loved the woods, and I didn't want anything to get in my way there, so I think I really wanted to block it out.
Many eyewitnesses like David Griffin never come forward because there is no evidence of what they saw. Just 6 miles from David Griffin's encounter, Aaron Wheeler says something attacked him.
Me and a couple of my friends were, you know, out driving around east of Rockville, Indiana, about 5 miles out in the country. And we were out spotlighting deer, and I'm not poaching, but just, you know, just counting how many deer we could see, you know, at night with a spotlight. The door was open because the window didn't roll down in this old beater of a truck he had. And I just reached out to shut the door, and when I did, I was grabbed. So I started screaming, and I tried to pull my arm back in, and, you know, it just kind of started pulling me out. So Andrew, he grabbed me around the waist because he seen me going out, and he was screaming too, and my friend Lee that was driving, he was screaming too. We were all three screaming, and he, you know, he just throws the car or the truck in first, and, you know, he's ready to get out of there. Well, as soon as he did that, you know, it seemed like it let go, you know, almost immediately. It only had me for probably 2 seconds. It let go, and I quickly shut the door, and I'm looking at Andrew, you know, did you see that? What grabbed me? This hand was huge. I mean, you can see my hand does not go around my arm, and I've got pretty large hands, so whatever this is had to be huge and had to be powerful, because I'm about 260 pounds, and I'm not weak at all.
Aaron says that due to the darkness and the fact he was not facing the creature, he never got a good look at what grabbed him.
This shouldn't have happened, and it did. So, you know, I don't know, I don't know how to explain it. It was just, it was the most terrified I've ever been in my life.
Usually got one skin response, you're going to palm your hand along the stick on.
Due to the lack of physical evidence, David Griffin and Aaron Wheeler have agreed to take a polygraph test to substantiate their stories.
A polygraph examination is at least a 2-hour to 3-hour process that measures the physiological responses of a human body.
Brad Kelly is a former sheriff's detective who has administered countless polygraph tests.
During the polygraph examination, you will see 2 pneumographs, one placed on the upper chest, one placed on the lower chest, and that measures inhalation, exhalation of the chest cavity. Attached to the left arm would be the cardio cuff, which measures mean blood pressure. You'd have a component attached to the palms of the hands, which is the galvanic skin response, as it measures electrodermal activity in the skin. And there's a theismograph on the thumb, which measures blood constriction in the thumb. Did you lie about seeing a 5-foot hair-covered animal in 1972 at the Downing Farm?
No.
Well, it looks like most of the areas were straightened out.
Auto mechanic Tony Carpenter is at work trying to measure the bite force required to pull the fender up and out, just as an angry, unknown creature in South Carolina did.
Well, let's see if we can clamp through here. A torque wrench reads how much force it's taking to clamp down on something in foot-pounds of torque. Okay, and that took 5.2 foot-pounds of torque to do that, which would be about 64 inch-pounds to bite through. That's reading about 20 foot-pounds right now through the rusty area. And we're through.
Many animals would be able to generate enough bite force to penetrate the rusty hood. However, bending a solid steel fender would require much more force. Carpenter connects a hanging strain gauge to the jaws, then attaches the jaws to the fender.
We used a tool to pull on a strain gauge, which tells you how many pounds of force it's taking to move an object. There's 60 pounds of force. 200, 250, 300. And I think we were about 350 when it let loose. Okay, so let's clamp in another spot up here, as the animal did. That looks like exactly what it did. Let's hook up again to our equipment. And let's tighten it up. And it has not punctured through. We did break a tooth. So one tooth is gone. And that's still. Okay, now here we are at 250 pounds. And there we go.
The reading on the strain gauge when the fender was pulled straight out and the tooth broke off was 306 foot-pounds of force.
This thing was really going after this vehicle hard. And, you know, whatever it was, I wouldn't have wanted to come across it at all. I mean, it's done damage that would break a tool made out of steel. And it was an incredible amount of force, and whatever it was, it had a lot of rage in it.
Monster Quest is searching America's Midwest and investigating close encounters with monsters. These men say they shot at a large hairy creature and hit it. This woman says something large and fierce chewed up the hood and fender of her van, while this hunter claims he saw the creature while out in the forest. And this man says a creature tried to pull him out of his car. Aaron Wheeler and David Griffin have been undergoing polygraph tests to determine the validity of their encounters in Indiana.
My findings with Aaron Willer is that he's deceptive to the question about being grabbed out of his truck by what he describes as Bigfoot.
Polygraph tests have an accuracy rate of 87 to 95%. Wheeler says the results are incorrect.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I wish I hadn't, I wish I had passed, but, the fact that I didn't, it doesn't change my story.
Griffin's test provided much different results.
As far as David Griffin, concerning the question posed to him about seeing a 5-foot hairy animal, he's non-deceptive to that question. So it's my professional opinion that he's telling the truth.
I saw what I saw, and I know what I saw.
John Vinroot doesn't believe an ape-like creature inflicted the damage to the car.
A large primate would have basically used his hands like a gorilla would and pounded. He would have destroyed the hood of this vehicle. They're not likely to get down on all fours if they're bipeds.
The bite force tests Tony Carpenter performed indicated it would have taken 306 pounds of force to bend the steel fender. This is consistent with a canine's bite force. Experts suspect that a dog is responsible for the damage.
And a wild animal is just not going to risk breaking one of their canine teeth off. Canine teeth, especially with wild canids, they're the way they make a living. That's how they catch prey. So losing a canine tooth is usually death for them.
It was probably like 7 feet tall, like a lot of fur, dark. Kind of looked like a bear on 2 legs, but bigger, and almost looked like a person at the same time.
The dents on this vehicle seem to support her claim. 2 hairs were found trapped behind the grille of her car and were sent to a lab for a morphology examination. The results? Cat and human.
I grew up in this area. I've been hunting and fishing my whole life. I've never seen anything like this.
While the hair samples do not corroborate this, the bullet fired by her boyfriend and his brother may support the claim.
And right after that's when I unjammed my gun and shot it. And that's when it stumbled back and started to come forward. I shot again.
They believe one of the bullets passed through the beast and lodged in a nearby tree. In an effort to determine if trace evidence remains on the bullet or within the limb, Professor Bruce McCord of the International Forensic Research Institute is searching for residual biological material. The initial results of the DNA extraction process are encouraging.
Some genomic DNA was recovered from this log. We immediately took some of that DNA, prepared it for this extremely sensitive quantitative study. Unfortunately, we also ran some blanks, and the DNA recovered from the bullet showed up at the same place as the blanks did, indicating essentially that no DNA was recovered that was human or from a larger primate. It's quite possible that any DNA that was left behind, or that any DNA that had stayed on that projectile as it passed through the body, may have been lost due to heat, due to passing through the couple of trees that it hit before it was recovered. So we can't be sure about that.
The Monster Quest team's investigation of these close encounters has turned up some interesting results. The team was able to gather some of the best physical evidence of any expedition, including hair samples, DNA, and eyewitness reports. In some of these cases, a known local animal was likely the perpetrator. However, the polygraph of David Griffin, an experienced hunter, proves that he got a good look at a creature he cannot explain, and that he is not lying.
I truly believe there's some kind of creature out there. We still sleep with a gun at our bedside. There's a gun next to Bob in the den. So, if we hear a noise out here at night, his Glock is loaded.
It's changed my patterns. I don't go outside alone anymore. It's totally changed everything that I do as far as night goes and being outside.
The level of tension seems to be on the increase. We're getting more and more violent interactions and confrontations. And I predict that probably within the next 25 years, we're going to hear about and document somebody being killed.